Okay, welcome everyone to this TU-Automotive webinar where we will be discussing the human element in autonomous systems. My name is Jamie Muir. I currently run the ADAS and autonomous portfolio over at TU-Automotive, and we'd just like to welcome you all again to this webinar. So, as automated systems rapidly gain traction in the automotive space, we will be looking at the work being done and the issues with human-machine interaction. So just to give you a brief overview of what we'll be covering, we're going to be discussing whether consumers understand the functionalities of ADAS and how we can simplify HMI to better build trust between the system and user. We're also going to be looking at operator and system constraints in order to determine how to keep the driver contextually engaged. And we're also going to be understanding how to communicate and build a relationship with the driver in order to keep them in the loop and avoid misuse of systems, particularly in level 3 and level 4 scenarios where drivers may disengage with their vehicle functionality. So I'd like to introduce our two expert speakers for today who are going to be tackling the subjects in this webinar. They are Bryan Reimer, who is a research scientist at MIT, and Viita, Senior Analyst of User Experience Practice at Strategy Analytics. So today's webinar will be interactive. So after we've heard a bit from our speakers, I'll be asking you, the audience, to cast your vote on some poll questions. So please make your voices heard and please feel free to join that at the end of the webinar. You'll also have the chance to ask some of your questions directly to our speakers. So if you just write in the go-to interface, and time permitting, we'll be able to address a few of those. So just to let you know, we'll be sending out a recording of today's webinar, including the slides, to everyone who's registered, and you can expect to receive that in a week, hopefully within a few days. So I don't want to take any more of your time from me, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker for today, Bryan Reimer.
How you doing today? In theory, sharing my screen here and some slides. Derek, you see that? Greetings, everyone. My name is Bryan Reimer here, MIT. I lead a group focused on human-centered automation and workload issues in the vehicle, bringing together psychology, human factors, all the way through advanced computer science and computer vision. And I'm here today to talk to you briefly about ADAS and automation, engineering with the human in mind. We frequently talk a lot about human factors from automated vehicles, lots of buzz in the news, lots of buzz in the industry, lots of unanswered questions in this area, from how do we ensure a smooth transition from highly automated control back to manual control, all the way through the questions of how and if a driver must stay in the loop in L3 systems today. These, in some sense, are many of the topics that we are wrestling with here in the lab and broadly as a transportation ecosystem. But I also think we need to begin to rethink how we view automation, the vehicle, and the viewpoint as we have, for a number of years, begun to increase the amount of sensing, computational complexity, and the relationship that drivers have with the car. I think the major tipping point, if you use Malcolm Gladwell's words, the tipping point, is the movement from automatic transmissions to from manual transmissions to automatic transmissions, where we really fundamentally began to relieve the operator of responsibilities for aspects of control, freeing them up to do other things. The theory being, in the U.S. marketplace, where automatic transmissions are in much higher distribution than in Europe, where manual transmissions are still more widely used, we see much larger distraction, texting, phone use problems here in the U.S., where we have the ability to functionally hold the phone in the hand. Now, in the modern world today, the Society of Automotive Engineers, NHTSA, et cetera, have tried to very detailed describe from an engineering perspective automation systems and relative level of automation associated with different characteristics of vehicle control, monitoring the environment, feedback for the driving task, and system capabilities. While these definitions as a whole may work at the engineering level, they do not necessarily translate as well to the distinctions that a public consumer may understand this technology at. If we ask the consumer out there about autonomous vehicles, they are thinking about fully self-driving vehicles, not the realities of a human system that is at least for the most of us in our foreseeable future. fully self-driving systems being one that will be here very quickly, but not necessarily going to impact my life quite as quickly. So if we begin to think about that definition, the red line across the SAE criteria is the distinction between the system's responsibilities and that of the human, and that's really all the consumer can understand. The system is responsible, or I as the driver, I as the human are responsible. So we can think about two different fundamental philosophies going on in the automotive industry right now, really a top-down design process where you're starting at level 4, level 5 systems such as Google, some of the prototypes by some of the OEMs, and trying to bubble technology down per se to level 4, level 3. On the other side, most of the automotive manufacturers are bubbling the technology up, starting with the fundamentals of ADAS and lateral and longitudinal control, building these systems together into Autopilot or pilot assist capabilities for two of the key trademark names here, where we're using the fundamentals of ADAS technology, which is automation at the finest extent that has been in the vehicle for some time now, to combine functionality together to relieve the operator of additional workload beyond that of what we have already done in the transmission. So the very difficult part here is the consumer in and of themselves has very little functional understanding of these ADAS and automation systems, although in terms of some ADAS systems such as assisted cruise control, lane keeping assist, lane departure warning systems have been around for a few years, our understanding of the cohesiveness of how humans are leveraging these technologies to support safe operation is not yet fully cognizant. We, at the crash test perspective or the IHS 5-star ratings, are beginning to understand whether the systems are present or not, doing engineering testing of these systems, but really have no functionally strong understanding about the human, the source of about 95% of traffic accidents, how they are interacting with the automation technologies in the cab. Here at MIT, with the support of Touchstone Evaluations and Jiro, founding members from Delphi, Liberty Mutual, Jaguar Land Rover, Autoliv, and Toyota, we are focused at this point on collecting cutting-edge data that helps us objectively characterize the behavioral and safety benefits of advanced driver assistance systems. That includes automation, other ADAS systems, and in-vehicle technologies under real use conditions. Two-phase effort. Phase 1 really focused over 2 years. Can we bring new meaning to how we are looking at naturalistic data in the wild by bringing together some of the latest innovations in big data computing with high-quality imagery and telemetry recording from vehicles. In a second phase, we'll follow on, moving beyond the Boston area to perhaps regions across the U.S., if not the world. Outcomes we're looking for here are really a data-driven understanding of drivers' utilization of technologies, the development of data and analytical methods that help us understand and answer important common questions about these technologies. So our initial focus, briefly, sharpened with the members, focused on forward zone technologies, lateral zone technologies, and combined L2 automation. That'll move forward when we see L3 technologies entering the marketplace in a year or more. And it's focused education as a key motivating factor to how to increase proper technology usage. On the naturalistic side of this effort, where we're equipping and instrumenting individuals' own vehicles, we are working in Tesla Model S's and X's, where we have 6 vehicles on the road across 10 subjects at this point, looking at really a liberal approach to vehicle automation with minimum hands-off the wheel requirements, actively increasing the sample as we speak. You see a picture of innovation happening in one of the vehicles. It was actually the first Model X brought into the fleet this morning. Over the next coming weeks, we will be moving more rapidly into Volvo XC90s, V90s, S90s, which have a autopilot feature that is more cognizant of a more conservative automation approach. These vehicles will be appearing in the U.S. marketplace over the coming weeks. We are also in parallel using field operators testing and small samples, looking at how we can motivate proper technology usage, working in vehicles from Mercedes CLA, Chevy Impala, Range Rover Evoque, and onto Volvo X90s. Key being here, if we properly educate individuals about the capabilities of the technologies, can we motivate proper, strategic, and effective use of these technologies to encourage safe operation of the vehicle? To give you a flavor of what some of the data looks like here, this is a visualization of part of a trip from Massachusetts to Florida, sped up at 200 times, where we are using computer vision here in a simple example to detect the status of the autopilot system, whether it's functioning, whether it's available, and how long the driver is traversing down the road. And as you can see probably in the visualization coming off, you'll see blips back and forth very quickly as the system's available, not available, and being used. And we can begin very detailedly to understand in the wild how people are leveraging the tipping point of advanced automation as it is entering the marketplace. The hope here is that we can drive data-driven innovation into the automotive industry, the insurance industry, and the supplier base to make better strategic decisions over time on how we employ technology in the vehicle. Some key points that we are beginning to dive into on the analytical side is in the area of transfer of control, looking to hundreds of transfers of control that are happening between the driver manually driving, level 1 automation at the ACC level in the Tesla, level 2 automation at the Autopilot, and back and forth to understand conditions in which drivers self-select to transfer control, time course of transfers, how long does it take the transfer to occur with different levels of alertness, the degree to which transfer occurs between L2 Autopilot and L1 ACC, and all the way back to L0. And finally, topics such as the impact of secondary activities on transfer control. What happens if you're talking on the phone and there is a request to drop back out of the Autopilot system? To do this at an effective rate, we are moving well beyond the traditional aspects of how many of the organizations in the world have looked at naturalistic data in the past. Using human eyeballs to inspect data, we're moving into areas where high-performance computing processor cores are enabling us to bring data to thousands of processors, much like Google, Tesla, and others are looking at sensing to understand the state of the world around us. We're focused on using the same type of sensing technologies, computer vision, advanced AI, to understand the characteristics of the human's relationship. So to give you an example of this, if you look at the video here, a staff member I have here driving a Tesla on the local road, we're doing post-processing of gaze region at very high quality of where they're looking at the road, center stack, rear view mirror, etc. And also illustrated in this, the engagement of the Autopilot system by the icon in there. So the Autopilot status engaged is computer imagery that we're bringing into the equation in the model here. Again, using the variety power of computer vision, advanced AI, we can begin to process and understand the telemetry signals that we can record from vehicles at light speed compared to methods that have been used in the past. Aspects that are interesting are obviously well beyond the Autopilot system here to collision mitigation systems, lane departure systems, advanced telematic systems in the vehicle, and the like. We can also look and understand in some testing here what happens when Tesla does not ask the driver, or Tesla asks the driver to take control, throws up red hands, many of you know, at 20 miles an hour, turns on the direction hazard signals and pulls the car to a stop. What is not playing in the system right here is the audio chime that is occurring at the same time. Well, the engineering decision around stopping the vehicle in the lane of travel is a very cognizant and strategic engineering decision. Those from the public policy and traffic safety community would also say that stopping a vehicle, if a driver perhaps is asleep or incapacitated in some way, in the middle of the road is not necessarily where we want to be over the long haul. How do we look forward over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years to making some of these strategic decisions of the traffic community in general? So conceptually, how do we match the mental model of the design team by using data-driven understanding of how technologies are being used faster in the wild, moving that back into the design process to move the designing of technologies and the mental model around those designs closer to that of the human's use, at the same time where we can use education to softly persuade at times the strategic use of technologies closer to that of the designer's mental model. The data-driven decisions perhaps are key to market advantages in the cohesive deployment of advanced automation in the wild. We've done some work recently in advanced adaptive cruise control, report that suggests that perhaps the human stomach, measured through physiology, is not as comfortable trusting of ACC systems during the novel phases of deployment as we might report in a qualitative or a quantitative scale. We also begin to understand that the glance time allocated to different regions of the vehicle may change based upon the status of the ACC system. Perhaps increasing the amount of distraction from the forward roadway from moving targets in the vehicle. Moving targets in the vehicle, we're including the RDS signal. That is a changing scope of what was playing on the radio, even though the radio was muted, as well as the blind spot indicator on the left mirror. So every time you see a movement in your peripheral vision, perhaps with the lack of attentional focus on the road or the reduction in attentional focus on the road, these salient objects in our periphery pulling on attention quite hard. Again, a fundamental aspect as we look to the future of automation design that we're going to need to understand. We also are looking to how education is being used in the marketplace. We recently did a survey of the point of sale, how technologies are being introduced at the dealership. Chevrolet, Subaru, Ford, Mercedes-Benz, Volvo, and BMW dealers were visited. One key highlight, Subaru perhaps is the key market leader in providing the consumer with a cohesive understanding of the benefits and limitations of those technologies. Volvo, as another key safety player, is really just focused primarily on the injury prevention, fatality reduction side of passive safety, with the acknowledgement that there are additional safety features available in packages. Subaru branding everything together under eyesight. Volvo, various packages based on the various brands, what's needed. The key here is one of the myths about the impact on automation on human performance is that as the investment in automation increases, less investment is needed in human expertise. It's a myth. The more automation, the more education that we need. That suggests that as we automate the driving ecosystem further, we are going to need to fundamentally change how we educate the populace to ensure that their mental models of the system overlap as cohesively as possible with that of the designers. They're educated not to overtrust or undertrust the technologies as we need to. They're educated when to appropriately use those technologies, etc. When we begin to look at the consumer, and this is the results of a recent survey of nearly 3,000 respondents, it's a white paper available from the lab's website, looking at drivers' perception and desires for the maximum level of automation they're going to be comfortable with, we see some fairly substantial demographic shifts where younger consumers in particular are more comfortable with higher levels of automation. Older adults who can perhaps benefit the most from the automation are more somewhat limited to technologies that would perhaps be more helpful in driving than those that are partially automated or full automated. And if we are going to have the penetration of automation technologies that we would like to enhance safety in ways we as an industry know we can, we're going to have to help shape this older cohort to begin to trust levels of automation that can perhaps save their lives in situations where they may not be able to respond. In the lab in particular, we focused heavily in studying and understanding technologies that vie for driver attention, both under manual control and increasingly various levels of automation. Some of the work over the last few years, both sponsored by IHS, Toyota Collaborative Safety Research Center, Santos Family Foundation, have focused on understanding how technologies over thousands of task interactions and hundreds of subjects pull for attention. Concept being, if we can't measure attention, how are we supposed to manage this in a rapidly changing operational context where we are shifting responsibility for the attentional aspects of driving from that of being primarily human-centered to that one of shared control and in the future more automation controlled. Again, we need to look at the measurement of attention over time cohesively to begin to manage that and help the driver manage that effectively. And understanding the latest in consumer electronics, how they're being used in the vehicle, where they're being used, and how they're being strategically interwoven into the driving context is critical. Just to give you an idea of the scope here, we have double-coded mediated glance data for about 12,000 miles of driving that has been investigated here. One of the characteristics of this glance data that has allowed us to innovate strategically forward in the driver state detection area, and specifically gaze detection, is the fact that we have about 16 million or more annotated images of drivers where they are focused. We were able to bolt classification models on the back end of traditional geometric-based models of driver attention, where we were pulling classification accuracies out of some of our older video. As you notice, the video here quality is quite different than what I showed earlier, that are in the 90+% range when the eyes are visible, and close to 90% when we're modeling on head position alone. That suggests that we can use monocular-based imaging systems, perhaps binocular or triocular in the distance, but monocular-based imaging systems right at this point, to effectively manage and help the driver manage some of the distraction and attentional characteristics that we are encountering today, as well as some of the auto aspects of tomorrow. We are also working in the emotion detection area, some work that was just released in this area, focused on integrating together the detection of emotion from face when the driver is listening to information, and the voice is actually speaking more of the emotion when they're talking. The key characteristics when we look at emotion in the vehicle, smiling per se is an illustration of frustration, laughing at the system for doing something. One of the key aspects as we look forward in an attention economy, where attention is really the coveted commodity that everybody is striving for here. We want an individual's attention effectively deployed, whether that is on our phones at certain points, advertisements at some points, and at the roadway in front of us. We want strategic deployed attention, and we need to manage attention. Humans, in essence, are easily distracted by nature, and we need to incorporate a deeper human-centered consideration of attention management into future systems in the vehicle, where the driver is inherently picking up technology and filling voids in workload and stress with more information. That's been the quote-unquote distraction epidemic for the last several years, decade or more. Well, we're now automating more, reducing the workload, stress, arousal, and the need for state support to help the driver manage these characteristics has never been more evident. The key being here that we need to more appropriately consider a functional view of driver attention that looks system-wide. It is a net impact of all sources of demand, secondary, operational, including automation, on safety. That means what you're doing in the vehicle matters where you're doing it. Talking on the phone may be the best safety technology in the world in the middle of the night, in the middle of a highway, in the middle of the desert. But sure as heck in the middle of downtown DC, Boston, New York City, Seattle, or San Francisco, in rush hour, that may not be the best allocation of attention. We need to look at that. We need to understand that, and we need to engineer that into systems that help support the operational characteristics of the driver. And beyond the topic today, looking at the aviation industry in particular, this is very centric to the attention models that are being pushed forward through aviation safety since the late 80s. Early 80s, replace the pilot. Pilot is source of the error. Bring automation in. Aviation industry very quickly realized that was not strategic. We need to look at automation systems where the interface to the driver is part of the decision process. So, as many of you know, there has been a sharp increase in motor vehicle deaths in the U.S. over the past year. A stark commitment between 20 of the OEMs, NHTSA to standardize AEB is a good step in the right direction. The projected reduction in rear-end crashes by 40% is perhaps an upper bound. We need to understand the benefits of these technologies so that we do not overpromise to a consumer benefits that may not be achievable. We need to promise realities, and we need to commit to making incremental steps forward in safety such that this increase in motor vehicle death is quickly changed in the other direction. So back to automation in particular, as I close here, one of the things that is very clear here in the automation community is that automation as we see forward will vary greatly by region and condition of use. There will be a lot of different forms of automation in the traffic environment. That means that we will see Autopilot like systems from Tesla, driver assistance systems in the marketplace. We will see level 4, level 5 automation technologies in the marketplace. But one needs to remember in the U.S. alone, the largest selling vehicle in the U.S. is the F-150 pickup. And many of the use conditions for a vehicle such as that, farm fields, construction sites, and the like, are not those ripe for early stage automation. We also need to remember that classic cars, from the Model T to a 1960s Camaro, will dot the U.S. and world's roadways for decades to come. Removing the right to drive my classic car will be a monumental occurrence over years. So if we look for the outlook of automated vehicles, we need to remember that we can define automation in various different ways, and that automated vehicle development will continue to change how we use cars, how we engineer vehicles, how we insure vehicles, and how we regulate them for decades, if not centuries to come. The capabilities of the automation in transportation infrastructure and our relationship with these technologies will change. The question is, how fast, how quickly, and what is the ultimate penetration, knowing that it will be decades, if not centuries, before all manually controlled vehicles are removed from the roadway, suggesting that a mixed fleet is one. I think one of the real key aspects of the transportation ecosystem that we need to focus on is understanding and supporting consumer capabilities. I look at Apple's Genius Bar and the availability of information to anybody who is willing to go and ask, and the support Apple is willing to provide to consumer understanding of the technologies as perhaps the best case study in how we can move advanced technology forward in the automotive ecosystem. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions or transition over to Derek as time allows.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian. We have a couple of questions, but I think we'll move to Derek first and then address a couple of questions towards the end. So yes, I'd like to welcome our next speaker, which is Derek Viita from Strategy Analytics. Take it away, Derek.
All right, thank you so much, Jamie. Give me just one moment to get all this going. Okay. All right, thanks, Jamie, and hello, everyone. Again, I'm Derek Viita. I'm a senior analyst with the UX Innovation Practice at Strategy Analytics. I focus on the in-vehicle user experience. So I and my team look at anything that a consumer can utilize in a car, interest in, usage of, willingness to pay for, connectivity, connected infotainment, as well as ADAS, as well as autonomous systems, which has been a fair portion of our research here as of late. So what I wanted to do today is sort of bring the consumer into the discussion and talk about how it is that they currently perceive these systems, as well as how that might look moving forward. First, I wanted to start by giving a brief anecdote of some research that we did recently that focused on millennials. Millennials, everybody considers them to be sort of more forward-thinking, fairly tech-savvy. So how is it that they feel about the current mobility services as well as autonomous systems moving forward? So we gave them an exercise where we asked them how they currently get around for a number of different tasks, including their commute, a trip to the dog park, a trip to a city 3 hours away, all sorts of different things. And then how they might do that 20 years into the future when we include self-driving cars, self-driving rideshare, and several other self-driving modes into the equation. And we found was interesting, even 20 years into the future, it was more of a 50-50 proposition. You had half of our participants who were very optimistic about the technology, who thought that we would get there in 20 years, and you had half of our participants who were very hesitant about the technology. Felt that it wasn't going to be there in 20 years and weren't sure if they would be able to trust the technology by that point. Even among the consumers, the millennials who were optimistic about the technology, you had a further division in terms of how they envisioned that to be, whether it is a self-driving car that you own, whether it's a shared model or anything like that. But what's interesting, at the end of this session, participants were asked, what if this was a semi-autonomous system? Is this something that you'd be interested in? And interest was far more universal. If they had the ability to take control when they wanted and pass it off when they wanted, interest was much higher. And this jives with previous research that we have done year over year looking at these systems. So we lump these into a series of safety systems that we look at, whether it's blind spot detection, night vision, things like that. This is something we've been tracking for several years, and over the past several years, autonomous systems have always tended to be fairly low in terms of consumer interest and things that consumers would be interested in, including in their future vehicle purchase. However, in the last year or two, we've noticed a significant spike to the point where even autonomous parking systems are now, depending on the market that we're looking at, among the top 5 safety systems that consumers are most interested in. So you're starting to see this swell of interest. But what's interesting is that you still have a fair chunk, again, that's 60 to 70 to 80% of consumers who are not interested in these systems. So why is that? This is something that we explored further in a series of focus groups that we ran earlier this year in Europe, focusing on autonomous systems. Are you interested in a certain autonomous system? And if you're not, why is that? And we threw several different models at our participants, whether it's a semi-autonomous system for highway driving, an automated public transport system, an automated ride-sharing system, all sorts of things. The figure that you're looking at right here is looking at for consumers who are not interested in a semi-autonomous highway driving system, what are the one or many factors that lead to your hesitance or your disinterest? What you're finding is that you have a lot of people who still enjoy the driving experience. You have consumers who are concerned about price, but you still have a whopping 81% who don't feel that that technology is trustworthy yet. And more concerning, 23% feel that they will never trust that type of technology. So this is sort of where we're at. It's a very exciting time to be in this industry. You have systems that are essentially ready to go, that will stay within your lane and steer for you and brake for you, but consumer acceptance is sort of that last thing that has not yet been fully addressed that still needs to be overcome. So there are several keys to overcoming that, and Bryan touched on a few of them. One of them is the discoverability of the system. Okay, it needs to be something that is very easy to use the first time you see it. Controls need to be well labeled. They need to be easily viewed. You can't necessarily trust the consumer to do the research beforehand. Second is usefulness. The system itself needs to function in a way that is useful to consumers. If it's something that is locked out for certain things, or it's something that is not comfortable or anything like that, that's something that is going to lead to a lack of consumer trust. Thirdly, obviously, you need a system that's going to be easy to use. There's a couple of reasons behind that. One is you need to have a system that's easy to hand off and take over. And number two, you need to have a system where the status is very easily displayed or conveyed, whether it's a tone to indicate that the system has taken over, whether it's a very obvious display, something that, as I'll go over in a minute, is not necessarily something that we're seeing so far in current systems. Lastly, you need to have a delightful or satisfying driving experience. So not only does the driving experience need to be accurate, the automated system needs to keep the car within the lane and keep it safe, but it also needs to be natural and comfortable. And as I'll go over here in a little bit, that's not something that we're seeing yet. Unfortunately, with systems that we're currently seeing on market, we're seeing a lack of a focus on the user experience in terms of all of the factors that I just mentioned on the previous slide. Controls tend to rely on existing hardware that's already in vehicles. In the case of, for example, Tesla Autopilot, which I have here on the bottom, you're utilizing the cruise control stock, which is already on, which is buried behind the steering wheel, attached to the column. It's not easy for a user to see it initially at first. I'll touch briefly on parking assistance systems, which are very scattered, run into a lot of the same problems where the controls can be on the center console or on the panel to the door side of the driver. You also have systems that have a control that lights up when a passive parking system is on. You have systems that light up when the passive parking system is off as well. Definitely something that needs a little more cohesion to. Displays, again, all over the place, not necessarily something that we would recommend from a user experience perspective. You have a lot of reliance on very small icons, very subtle differences. In the case of the Volkswagen Passat that I have illustrated here on the right, you have a reliance on sort of a boldness of colors. So you have the lane markings that will be bright white or fade depending on the confidence that the system is able to see lane markings, not necessarily something that's human focused there. You have a reliance on visual appeal over usability. In this example, we have an alternate view of the cluster of Volkswagen while a semi-autonomous system is active, and you'll see down there at the very bottom the current status of the system. Again, not ideal. You see the same thing with parking assistance systems. Definitely something that doesn't take the driver into account. In the case of the Peugeot system that I have here on the top left, this is indicating that the driver needs to pass a parking spot at a slow speed, but that's not necessarily something that's easily conveyed from the display that you're seeing here. So again, the ultimate, what I'm trying to impart here is that the displays and controls are not necessarily where they need to be for currently implemented systems. And again, I'm focusing on semi-autonomous driving assistance, specifically for highway driving, for the case study that I'll go over here in a second, but this goes for parking assistance systems as well. The current state of the industry is that we have systems that are a good first step, but still require vast improvement from a user experience and human factors perspective to address consumer acceptance concerns that I touched on earlier. You have systems that don't reliably inform the driver of the status of the system, or more importantly, when a system has failed. You have displays that are not easily understood at quick glance because you're you have visual appeal that is being prioritized over usability in many cases. You have controls that are scattered and unstandardized, and less of an HMI issue, but definitely an issue for consumer trust. You have rides that, although they might be accurate, are not necessarily going to be comfortable or ideal for a user. What I wanted to do is go over a case study that illustrates many of these issues. So we ran a user experience benchmark several months ago utilizing the Tesla Autopilot. What we did was we put 12 first-time users in front of the brand new and just come out Tesla Autopilot system, gave them very minimal instructions in terms of how to operate it, and told them how to turn it on and off, and where these relevant displays would be located, but gave them no further instructions. How would they feel about it? Would they be able to operate it safely? And qualitatively, how do they feel about the system in general? What we found is there was sort of a first 2 minutes and a next 2 minutes experience. Here we see a consumer in the first 2 minutes of turning on Autopilot, and he's very hesitant. You'll see his hands right by the wheel. He sees that the wheel is moving a little bit, but he's still unsure that the system is truly in control. He feels like he wants to intervene, but he's not sure why. After those first 2 minutes, some sort of physical movement of the car while Autopilot is active made them feel more comfortable. When the car braked itself from merging traffic, or they felt like they could retake control, or they executed an automated lane change successfully. One brief note that I wanted to mention here, though, is that an accurate drive is not necessarily a comfortable drive. We had many users who were concerned that although they were aware that the car was being kept within the middle of the lane, they felt uncomfortable with the fact that they were in the middle of the lane. For example, if they were passing a large tractor trailer or an oversized load, or if they were on a section of motorway that was very rutted and weather-beaten, where being in the center of the lane was not necessarily the most comfortable drive. So I wanted to mention that. One other thing I wanted to point out is you'll notice among all these factors that made the users feel more comfortable, HMI is nowhere in there. And the reason for that is the HMI is very unclear. You have tones that are extremely subtle that don't indicate clearly to the user when handoff or takeover has taken place. You have very subtle iconography on the displays. So for example, if a vehicle is passing, you have the air bubble that I've noted here on the top right to indicate that a vehicle is passing, not necessarily obvious to the user that that's what is being indicated there. You have minimal understanding of inter-vehicle distance. So although users were instructed on how to adjust inter-vehicle distance, the iconography on the display did not make sense. They were not sure what that number meant or what the vehicles meant. So you have a number of different issues there. But more importantly and more concerning, even after they felt that they could trust the system, it was not clear to them how to monitor what was going on with the system. So I wanted to show a brief video here that illustrates this issue. In this case, we have a user who has been driving Autopilot for about 15 or 20 minutes, has been commenting on it, has executed an automated lane change, and then the following happens. So I want you to watch the video as I play this.
How do I know this is on? How do you know that it's on? I don't know that it's doing. I thought there was some clear. Tell me I call it. I don't see anything. It's not clear to you that it is active right now.
So you'll notice there that even though, again, he has been engaging in Autopilot for about 15 or 20 minutes, has been commenting on it. The car has slowed down before merging traffic, has gone around curves, but even 15 or 20 minutes in, using the display, he can't tell whether the system is on or off. One thing that I wanted to point out as well, this is related to my comment earlier on accurate versus comfortable drives. You still have some issues with accuracy. They're getting better than they used to be, but this is still something that we know. We had a few incidents where the vehicle would attempt to exit on its own. So even though you have a consumer who has been driving for, in this case, close to 30 minutes and is fairly comfortable with the system, suddenly this happens and leads to sort of an issue with trust. So I want to comment on that very briefly here as I switch here. Notice that she's very concerned there. The vehicle tried to exit on its own, absent of any other traffic or anything else around, and then slingshot back into the travel lane. So again, as you'll note, the systems are essentially there. We're able to keep a car within the lane. We're able to adjust for oncoming or for merging traffic in an automated highway driving scenario. But you still have these two enormous barriers that have yet to be fully addressed on consumer trust and how we engage in handover and takeover or control these systems, as Bryan so eloquently put. Consumers essentially want to know whether the system is in charge or whether I am, and right now we're not quite there. What we found is consumer interest is increasing. Fewer consumers say that they're not at all interested, but you still have a large percentage of consumers who just clearly do not trust the technology yet. OEMs do have this opportunity to gain this trust, but the current autonomous systems are fairly and have these UX issues that I've illustrated today. You have human factors issues for handover control, and they ignore that issue of consumer acceptance. Even if a solution is safe, the consumer might not use it if they feel that it's not comfortable or that for whatever reason it's not safe. So I'd like to close very briefly by sort of bringing back this consumer who's had to drive with the system for a couple of minutes before he felt comfortable. There are ways that we can sort of hasten that and make it easier for him to view current status of the system and sort of engender trust in these systems. You need to make these systems easy to discover. They need to be easy to use, not only from a handover and takeover scenario, but from a monitoring of current status. And these systems must move accurately, and the car must move accurately and naturally while the system is in control. Ultimately, consumers want something that is practically useful, something that's easy to use, and more important of all, just something that they can trust the first time that they use it, and not necessarily after using it for a while or watching friends use it. It's something that they need to be able to trust when they step into the cockpit and take control. And with that, I'll throw it back to Jamie, but thank you for your time, and again, happy to answer questions.
Fantastic, Derek. Thank you very much. So we're running a little bit behind time, but I think we've got time for one poll, and then hopefully we'll have time for one or two questions. We've got quite a few there. So we'll just run the one poll for the audience. So audience, if you're ready. So the question we're going to ask is, what do you see as the biggest barrier to consumer adoption of automated safety systems? Number one, lack of awareness. Number two, a lack of trust in the system / fear of the unknown. Number three, they don't understand the value of the systems, or four, other. We will put that up for the vote, and then we will have a quick discussion with our speakers on the outcome. Okay. So we'll have just a couple of seconds more. I'll count you down from 5. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we'll flash the results up on screen, and I think it's a fairly conclusive result from what I can see here. So yes, I think there's pretty unanimous agreement there. We have 86% of you guys believe it's the lack of trust in the systems and fear of the unknown. I'll throw that quickly to our speakers. Your thoughts on that? Surprised or as expected?
100% as expected here from Bryan. I think the trust issues are going to be one of the hardest issues to overcome. Trust is built very slowly over time. It takes investment on the part of the user operator here in this context to build that trust, and it can be eroded very quickly and very easily. We've all experienced situations with vehicle technologies that do erode that trust when they are technologies that have control of the vehicle, and all of a sudden the vehicle is doing something that you don't expect. Personally, even lane keeping assistance has taken me from the operational lane moving forward in the wrong direction towards the oncoming traffic in a way that just literally erodes your trust in that system instantly.
Completely agree with Bryan. Like he said, I feel like even in a best case scenario, it only takes one adverse event to sort of dial everything back from the consumer. So it's something we need to monitor moving forward.
Now, I think what's important to do to recognize, though, that both Derek and I have talked extensively about Tesla's Autopilot system. You know, the folks who are driving hundreds of miles with these systems weekly, some of these are folks we're working with, many beyond that, are trusting these technologies in ways that we fully don't understand. They are learning to live with some of the unknowns, learning to make adjustments in the wheel when they're not comfortable how close to the box truck to the right they are. So there's functionality in the Autopilot system that is allowing them to get involved to help build trust over time. The question is how many individuals are over-trusting the systems, treating them too much, as we see many times in clips on YouTube, asleep at the wheel, distracted at the wheel, etc. And that's really an over-trust. That's not within the design specifications for these technologies at this point.
Right.
Okay, fantastic. We've actually got a question from the audience here that pans off that quite nicely, so I'll throw that out to you guys. So the question we've got here is, historically, people are poor at predicting their own future behavior, e.g. no one wants a touchscreen keyboard. There tends to be an early adopter crowd who demonstrates to others what the concept works. Do you think enough people exist in that category to keep the market viable in the long term?
It's an interesting question. I think the answer is yes. But I think that the lead adopter category is in many senses the category we need to understand the most, and that's why I started this new consortium focused on understanding in many senses this lead adopter category. The better we can understand the lead adopter category, the faster we can adjust technologies to enhance trust, enhance interface characteristics, and the like as they are moving from the lead adopter category to the consumer category. So in the automotive life cycle, we were dealing with an average of 5-year development cycles for a while, where that's somewhat coming down, needs to come down much further. But how do we get insight on technologies, Autopilot, Pilot Assist, 3 or 4 other technologies that are fast coming down the pipe, AEB, lane keeping assistance, all of these technologies, how do we get that faster into the design cycle so that, perhaps 2 years from product launch, 18 months or 12 months from product launch, we can make some design changes based upon these lead adopters, and perhaps over time expand the construct of what lead adopter is. In the automotive sphere, we do see low-level consumer vehicles, the Honda Civic being a great example of trying to bring younger individuals, new purchasers of a consumer-level vehicle into that lead adopter category with advanced safety technologies. A clear push towards expanding that lead adopter category over time.
The other thing that I wanted to jump in here, though, is there's several systems, and we'll jump out of the driving category for a second and talk about Park Assist. Park Assist is making its way not necessarily into some of these premium models, but also into like non-premium models and mid-levels and things like that, where you might have consumers who are not lead adopters or premium box checkers and things like that who are adopting these systems. So it's something that it's not necessarily, lead adopters are an important demographic we want to cover, but it's not solely that, particularly for some of these non-driving systems that we need to be concerned about as well.
Yeah, I think the key in parking systems, Derek, and we spent a lot of time back in 2010, there's some more public on this now, working with Ford Motor Company on their Park Assist system, is, the consumer side, as soon as they understand that technology, they're looking to buy it. It's getting over that hump and the education required to get over that hump and how this technology can help me and how cohesively done these technologies are in some cases. So I think we can move more individuals into some of those lead adopter categories with a little education along the way. The unfortunate part is that education model and the place for that education doesn't exist in the automotive ecosystem in the way it needs to.
Right, and the key thing there that I think you mentioned is the usefulness of it as well. It needs to be something where the value needs to be conveyed to the user, that they're saving whatever it is, time, money, it's more comfortable, things like that.
Exactly. We've known from some of our broader work here in aging that there's been a misnomer over years that older adults won't learn new technologies. What we've learned is that older adults need to see the value and the warrant for that investment of time sooner, to invest the time to learn the new technology. I've seen a bunch of wheels before. Why do I have to learn about a new wheel? Well, I need to show them why fairly quick. Attention being the key commodity here.
Right.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more. We'll just get that on our screen now. Okay, so the question is, it seems that OEMs choose HMI design for various reasons independently. Do you see a possibility of standardization of HMI design for automation in cars? This is actually one of our poll questions, so I'm quite glad that one's come up. I'll pass it over to you, gentlemen.
You want to start there, Derek?
HMI standardization, I think that is it a possibility? Yes. I think that it's something that's that's been a challenge for even cruise control. It's something that hasn't been standardized for many, many years, but for something like this where it's definitely more of a safety issue, where you have systems that are making more decisions and are more in control, it's something that we need to make more of an effort to do than we have for previous technologies.
I think it's incredibly difficult and perhaps the key to safety success in this area. Many families in the U.S. own 2 cars, occasionally rent a vehicle, and the like. We cannot look at functionally different alerting mechanisms and expect human response to occur if these alerting mechanisms are different between vehicles. So, FCW, AEB alarms perhaps are a good example of a need for a desperate standardization. Same thing with keyless ignition standards and the need for turning off a vehicle at high speed. We can't look at different models that you need to look deep into the owner's manual to understand this. And the key is that these are rare situations. If you experience them once, you now have a mental model for this. I walk into my spouse's vehicle and it's working someplace differently. We see some of this creeping into problems in the cruise control area where one vehicle in the family has ACC, one doesn't. And mode confusion is occurring walking back to that older vehicle where we no longer understand, we forget because we've driven so many miles with the radar adjusting distance that this older car doesn't have that.
And the problem with standardization is that everybody enjoys standardization and thinks that it's a great idea in theory, but not necessarily someone else's standardization. Everybody wants to have their own idea and wants that to be propagated. So I'm sensitive to that, but the issue that we have right now, especially for some of these semi-autonomous driving systems, is that it's really all over the place. The audio tones are all over the place, from something that's a very subtle speak at the beep tone to a shrill tone with brake jerks and everything like that. So if we can sort of narrow that a little bit, it can go a long way.
Yeah, I agree very much with Derek. Very hard area and an area that is in desperate need, and one that's going to be very difficult as we look to the future, where standardization almost needs to happen before deployment to keep these mental models together and allow people to cohesively work with these technologies forward. Very difficult area, an area I think the industry is going to struggle with for some time.
Right.
Fantastic. Well, we're running a bit short on time now, but what I'd like to do is just fire up the poll for that last one. So we've heard our speakers' thoughts. Now let's get the audience views on that question. So specifically, the question is, should OEMs and suppliers collaborate more efficiently to standardize HMI features to increase user engagement with ADAS and autonomous features? You've got some pretty simple answers. Yes, no, perhaps, but it will never happen. So I'll just give you guys a couple of seconds more just to get some closing thoughts from the audience. Okay, we'll just count you down from 5 now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you very much, audience. So most of you are going with yes. We've got 74% of people say yes. A couple of the pessimists among us have said like that will never happen. But yeah, it's a conclusive yes from there. But we are almost out of time today. So I'd just like to take this opportunity once again to say thank you to our speakers, Bryan and Derek. Thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate your insights today.
Thanks for the invitation,
Thank you.
Derek. Thanks for your words. Very enjoyable.
Thanks.
Great stuff. And to all our audience, the recording will be made available in a few days' time, so we'll send that over to you as soon as it's ready. But that's it from TU Automotive HQ. Thank you very much, everyone.